Laying out priorities. We're a few days away from the State of the State address, when the governor will be laying out her goals for this legislative session. Hear from an expert on what the governor has already indicated she'll be focusing on. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Another year starts and lawmakers returning to the Capitol. All eyes turning now to the State of the State address, which will be held on Tuesday of this week. The governor already indicating that some of what she'll be focusing on this legislative session. Recently, proposed legislation would expand consumer protection laws and impact affordability. Among the legislation proposed, a bill to ban copays for insulin on certain insurance plans.
Cost of a vial of insulin can vary, and I'm taking this from GoodRx, anywhere from $30 up to $130 per vial, and a single vial of insulin may last someone a couple days up to a few weeks.
This year's address will be the governor's second as an elected governor. It will be held on January the 9th. Joining me now is our Capitol correspondent, Jamie DeLine, to give us a little deeper insight into what the governor may be focusing on this year's State of the State, and we can talk beyond that topic. Jamie, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We usually see you down at the Capitol building. For those who've watched your stories, walk me through that a little bit. What's a day for you? You come in, are you with a photographer sometimes, or sometimes
No,
not?
I'm completely by myself. I share an office in the State Capitol building, and I come up with story ideas and pretty much reach out to all the lawmakers and ask them, hey, what are you focusing on?
Is it you going to them a lot for stories, or do they bring things to you and say,
it's
hey?
It's a mixture of both.
Got you. And then you'll put together the stories, and off it goes all around New York State.
It does, yeah, and 9 different TV stations across the state.
Have you got to the point where some of the important people recognize your face and they know the question's coming?
Yeah, some of them.
Good, good.
Sure.
So let's talk about the State of the State. I grew up in this area. I've started radio, TV. I covered a million of these things. But for those who don't know, what is the State of the State when the governor does it? It's really a speech, but it's more than that, right?
Right. I mean, essentially, it's a really big speech with all of the priorities that she wants to tackle in the new year. And that could be a wide range of topics. It could be about education. It could be about housing. We don't really know what exactly she's thinking until she gives that speech. And then what she says in that speech will usually be in her executive budget. And that's something that she will talk with the legislators about and try to come up with a compromise.
Yeah, I've heard lawmakers always say, well, I like what she said or he said if it's Andrew Cuomo, but the devil's in the details. I got to see what this is all going to cost or how we're going to pay for it. That's the budget part of it, right, that comes out later. So you can appreciate the speech, but then say, how are we paying for all this, right?
Exactly. And like you said, the devil is in the details. We won't know exactly how much things will cost or if there's any limitations on anything until we see the actual bill and can go through it and talk with lawmakers and even lawyers sometimes being like, what does this mean? It says this. Does it mean this or does it mean something else?
Yeah, and as we saw with even things like cannabis, sometimes they push through things that are a little vague, and then you start getting lawsuits and things later. So they got to be careful how they push things out.
Very careful.
Usually before the speech, a governor will kind of start dropping hints, having little news conferences or appearances like Kathy Hochul did the last week or so. What were some of the things she talked about? I wrote a few of them down. Infant mortality, maternal care, that seemed to be one that was important to her.
Yeah, and this is interesting because this is something that she didn't do last year. She kept things pretty tight-lipped last year and didn't really get ahead of anything in the days leading up to the State of the State. But she did mention that she wants to cap copays for insulin for certain insurance plans. What those insurance plans are, we have yet to see. We have to look at the actual bill to find that out. And she also wants to go back to basics when it comes to education. She really wants to focus on phonics and comprehension because she wants New York State's reading scores to go up. We know that the pandemic really had a negative impact on students' learning.
Yeah, I saw, it's funny you mentioned that because we did a story, I think it was from you, about $20 million she wants carved out, which will go towards educating teachers and maybe helping them with the programs with the phonics. I'd imagine, and I'm sure it's true, that if a 5 to 6, 7-year-old learns to read and gets that foundation, it's going to affect everything else that happens afterwards in school.
Exactly. And her Back to Basics plan that she wants to implement is something that states all over the country are doing. So it's not a new idea.
She was also talking about consumer protection a little bit. Is this all falling under the same area?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with like medical debt and things like that. And again, once we see the actual bills, we'll have a better understanding about what that will include.
Yeah, we have a guest coming on saying that receipts have been pretty good in terms of taxes, but there's still some budget gaps. All of this has to be paid for. People have to keep that in mind, right?
Exactly. I mean, a lot of this is taxpayer money that will be, going towards the budget, and they have to figure out how exactly are they going to spend this money and make it the most cost effective for everyone.
They still have lobbying days there, right? When I cover the Capitol, it's usually once a week, everybody county committee. Is it still that way, or is it spread out over every day?
Yeah, I mean, usually there's like one day a week where we'll see like a lot of protests happening and lobbyists walking around the building. But it's the state capitol, it's open to the public, so you never really know when those types of things are going to happen.
You must feel covering it, like everybody makes a good point about why they need the money for their thing or their program or their whatever. It's not an endless pool of money, though. I mean, this isn't the federal government, you just print money. They have to balance the budget at the end of it, right?
Exactly. And that's really the hard part with the lawmakers. They have to say, okay, what is the most pressing need and how are we going to address that? And we just had our first day of session this past week. So we learned that when it comes to the overarching theme of the legislation that these lawmakers want to pass this year, it's affordability. It's a word that's being used by Democrats, Republicans, and even the governor herself. We know that Democrats are really wanting to focus on housing this year. It was mentioned in the speech with Andrea Stewart-Cousins as well as Speaker Carl Heastie, and they want more housing and just making it more affordable with new construction.
Right. Well, inflation's been hard. That's the one that's affected everybody. And the governor's also, I've heard her say in the last 6 months, people, there's a certain camp that just says, we'll just tax the rich, get more, tax people who make money. You got to be careful with that too, because you don't want people leaving the state because they get taxed out.
Exactly, and out-migration is definitely an issue here in New York State. Over the next few years, we're projected to lose maybe 3 congressional seats, which is a big deal.
Sure.
And Republicans really want to make sure that that gets stopped in its tracks. And there's actually bipartisan legislation from Senator Jim Tedisco and Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara, and they want to have a commission to study why exactly are New Yorkers leaving the state. Obviously, there's big pressing issues like housing and high taxes, but what are the little issues that are also causing New Yorkers to leave? And that's what they really want to find out.
Right. Well, it could be snow since we're getting storms lately. But last question, from your perspective as a journalist, this is a loaded question. Is it different covering Kathy Hochul versus Andrew Cuomo? Because very different personalities. Is she more accessible? It seems like she might be, but maybe that's me just thinking that.
I covered Andrew Cuomo here and there, but this is my first time really focusing on just state politics, and I've been doing it for the past 2 years. But overall, I do have a good relationship with the governor's office. If I have a question, I'll message them, and usually I hear back.
It's going well. That's good.
Well.
That's good. Jamie, thanks for coming in and talking to us today about all this. And I know you'll be busy on Tuesday's the State of the State, and about a week or so later the budget, right?
Yes. So a lot more to come.
All right. So don't call Jamie. She can't pick up. She's down at the Capitol. All right. With the State of the State coming up in a few days, the legislative session already kicking off, as Jamie just said. When we come back, we'll hear from a budget expert what lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are saying is going to be their main priorities heading into the early days of this new session. Also, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We are also on X, formerly known as Twitter. I still call it Twitter anyway. WTEN is where you'll find us. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. This past week, state lawmakers began their new legislative session. The Senate Majority Leader explaining that affordable housing is a key issue that lawmakers need to tackle this year.
The most significant cost burden facing our constituents today is housing. The soaring cost of living in New York threatens the very essence of our state's identity.
She went on to call for a comprehensive plan that both protects tenants, also the one that will build new affordable housing. Republican leaders are sharing a similar sentiment.
People can't afford to make ends meet in New York. Taxes are off the chart. We lost 100,000 people that voted with their feet last year and left New York. We have to change the trajectory New York's on. We have to make it more affordable.
Now, in addition to affordability, both Democrats and Republicans agree they need more help from the federal government to address the current migrant crisis. Joining us now to give additional insight on what lawmakers will be focusing on, or at least the early part of the new session, Patrick Orecki, the director of the State Studies for the Citizens Budget Commission. Patrick, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
We're getting not so much to crunch time, but almost crunch time now with it, because with them back in town, state of state coming up, and then we'll see a budget. Again, what things are you watching for right now?
Yeah, well, the budget's due on the 16th, and the governor's executive budget is kind of the Super Bowl of the budget making process. It's where you really see the parameters of how the budget is going to take shape. So the big things for us are kind of what the bottom line is. Right now, the state has budget gaps next year to close, about $4.3 billion as is projected right now, and even bigger gaps in the out years. So how the state manages that is going to be the key question.
Is it tax receipts not coming in the way they would like, or is it more? I know that spending was up because of a lot of COVID money came in, which it's great to have free money, so to speak, but you start a new program, then you got to fund it afterwards.
Yeah, it's really on both sides of the ledger. So on the receipt side, the state was very kind of conservative and cautious this time last year, said economists are projecting a recession or some other downturn. We should budget for that, which is exactly what the state should do, is be cautious like that. That hasn't happened. So receipts are coming back up, which is good, and that'll probably help close some of the gap. How much, we don't know. On the spending side, you're right. Spending was added in huge amounts, especially in 2021 and 2022. In that 2-year period, we had more spending added to the state side of the budget than in the prior decade. So there was a lot of new spending added.
Is $4 billion, to me, it sounds like a massive number in terms of a budget that's guessing over a couple billion. Is that something that's very manageable, or is that tricky to pull that off?
It's manageable, especially when we watch the tax receipts come in. So we might close this year out with a little bit of extra money. If past is prologue, the state might roll some of that forward to help close the gap, and then also be able to take up receipts for next year too. So that could drive a pretty significant closing.
The economy really does drive a lot of this, doesn't it? Like we see the housing market's been stuck because interest rates are high. People aren't selling to downsize because they can't replace the house with a huge rate. And if that gets going, and then suddenly everything goes, right? The furniture stores are doing better. Home Depot's doing better. More money comes in that way, correct?
Yeah. The single biggest source of state-generated income for the state budget is the personal income tax. And especially in New York, it's very concentrated on high-income earners, which over the last few years have enjoyed a pretty strong period. Huge increases in capital gains, doubled over a couple-year period, and that really drives up the tax receipts for the state. The flip side is, if you get the opposite happening, which is a big question mark, that'd open a hole.
We've seen numbers where a good chunk of people left New York, some probably just retiring, but others maybe they're fleeing because of the high tax rates. I don't know where that stands, but the governor and lawmakers have to be careful, don't they, in terms of just closing gaps by raising taxes, because that can have a negative effect, right?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where you are in the state and where you are in the income brackets. For high income earners, taxes are a huge thing that they're looking at. For most New Yorkers, the big affordability issue is housing. And the governor tried to do a lot on that last year. Couldn't come to an agreement with the legislature. It might come back, but being an election year, I think the possibilities might be more limited.
The migrant issue is a huge political issue, but it's also, to some extent, a cost issue. I know the New York City's mayor has been really saying, guys, we need money. We need help with this. We can't do this. Do you think that's going to factor into her budget or address, or where things land?
Yeah, it might be the big risk for the state in the budget right now in terms of policy choices. Last year, the state put in about $1.9 billion over a 2-year period, especially to help New York City. New York City has costs well beyond that too, so that's going to be one of the big asks from the city come budget time, is for more fiscal support there.
We're such a blue state. Does that translate that Kathy Hochul can just say, here's what I want, here's my grocery list, and get everything? Or does it not work that way, even when they all have a big D in front of their name, that everybody's got their own priorities?
There's still tough negotiations. I mean, even the Democratic caucuses in the legislature have big majorities, which gives them some good leverage against the governor. They say we have a lot of room in our caucus. But that caucus comes from all over the state, from tons of different backgrounds. They have varying perspectives too, so it's not just a rubber stamp situation.
Maybe it's my imagination or I'm projecting here, but it seems like because she's living in Albany, where Andrew Cuomo was more with his then girlfriend or down in the city. I feel like we just had her this week in Watervliet Elementary School. We see her doing more things. Does she have more of an eye than most governors, would you think? And maybe I'm wrong on this, but to help upstate as well, because she's from the Buffalo area, she's living up here, that she has a sense of where we need help.
I think some of the themes are pretty consistent across the two governorships, including trying to get kind of the big tech jobs upstate to try to get some nexus of some new industry upstate. We saw it in Buffalo, now in Syracuse and around Syracuse with Micron and chips manufacturing. Some of the economic development projects are fairly consistent. I think a little bit of the different approaches, yes, where she comes from and where she spends most of her time, but a lot of the things are pretty consistent.
What about issues like education? It always seems like they have a strong lobby. They always want more money. Are they going to be able to get it in this budget, or are they going to be watching those bottom lines and saying, look, we can't give you everything you want? Yeah,
the state's already baked in pretty significant increases for education aid over the years. So 3 years ago, the state implemented or enacted the implementation of the phase-in of the full foundation aid formula, which was billions of dollars increases every year. This is the last year of that phase-in, but there's still multi-billion-dollar increases going forward already in the budget. At the national level, because it's going to be a presidential election year, you can already sense that Dems and Republicans don't want to help each other because everybody goes to their corner and grabs their guy or gal and says, we're at war to win the White House. Does that trickle down to us, or are we sort of immune from that because we're a blue state? And will that affect us, the national politics, in terms of getting things done here? I think it certainly does. I think obviously it changes what column inches are available and how the state lawmakers can drive the narrative in the press and in the public. I think one of the big things to pay attention to, too, is in an election year, most lawmakers or all lawmakers in New York will have primaries in June for the legislature. Mm-hmm. So that kind of changes when they're going to be looking to get out of Albany and back down to their districts to do their campaign work. So that does change the timing a bit. Yeah, we're wrapping up. We didn't do this last time. If someone wants to learn more about you or your organization, where would they find you? Sure. We're the Citizens Budget Commission. You can find us on social media. Our website is cbcny.org. Got you. And they can read all of the research you guys do and really get in the nuts and bolts of budgets and where money's going, right? Yeah, certainly. And when the executive budget's out, we'll have plenty to say and analysis out there. Sounds good. Patrick Orecki, thanks for coming in. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Well, it's been 4 years now since the start of the pandemic, and some details regarding COVID-related nursing home deaths still have not been released. When we come back, we'll hear from a New York lawmaker calling for a release of a report that would give those details and what's causing the delay. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. Also, you can reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. One state senator is calling for a pandemic policy report about the nursing home deaths to be released to the public after a year-long review. Capitol correspondent Jamie DeLine has the story and shares what the governor told reporters about it.
Senator Jim Tedisco says a report about COVID-19 nursing home deaths should have been released to the public over a month ago.
What we realize right now, and this is why study is so important, is that pandemics and viruses don't go by legislative time. They come willy-nilly, and they may be coming in a near future.
The senator wants the information to be released so that the state can learn from past mistakes. Over 15,000 nursing home deaths are being blamed on a March 2020 executive order by then Governor Andrew Cuomo, which placed COVID-positive patients in nursing homes. According to Tedisco, a firm was given a $4.3 million contract to conduct a year-long review of New York's pandemic policy.
So I'm just asking, Governor, give us the report. You signed a contract. The Olson Group from Virginia signed a contract. I want to see what they put forth.
When asked at a press conference about the report, this is what Governor Hochul told reporters on Wednesday.
I'm very frustrated by the pace. I wanted this before, but absolutely it'll be released to the public when it's done. We're staying on top of it. We're pushing. And I'm told it's going to be, I won't even give a date, but we're told it shouldn't be too far off. But I keep asking all the time the same question.
Senator Tedisco says families who lost loved ones, as well as taxpayers whose money is going towards this report, deserve to know exactly what this review entails. Reporting in Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. And a reminder, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out and find us on X, known formerly as Twitter. We're at WTEN. Finally, in Empire State Weekly, returning to the State of the State. This upcoming Tuesday, the 9th, the governor will be laying out her legislative priorities for the new session. To get insight on those priorities, we're looking ahead to next week when we'll have a reaction to the State of the State from the State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, as well as from key lawmakers who will be tasked with helping to carry out the governor's ideas and proposals. We'll take a look at all those reactions coming up next week. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of the show on 10 TV stations all across the great state of New York.